Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. Thanks again to Andy McCarthy and Scott Bertram for subbing towards the end of the week. Jim is back safe and sound from Minneapolis and ready to roll with some pretty big news last night, Jim, that constitutes our good martini. Good in the sense that things are clarifying. It's always sad to see Tim Scott no longer in the race. I think he's someone that just about everyone on the right respects. But at the same time, he could see what the polls were. He could see where his money was, and he could see that he probably wasn't going to qualify for the next debate, which if the RNC has done anything right in this cycle, it's raising the standards to qualify for debates that have forced people to make some tough decisions. And Tim Scott is the latest. He made his announcement on the Fox News show of his very good friend and former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy on Sunday night.
If you ever want to love your country more, run for president. Traveling this country, meeting people has been one of the most fantastic experiences of my entire life. I love America more today than I did on May 22nd. But when I go back to Iowa, it will not be as a presidential candidate. I am suspending my campaign. I think the voters who are the most remarkable people on the planet have been really clear that they're telling me, not now, Tim. I don't think they're saying, Trey, no, but I do think they're saying not now. And so I'm going to respect the voters, and I'm going to hold on and keep working really hard and look forward to another opportunity.
Jim, it's hard not to love his infectious love for America, but I think he's got an honest appraisal of what's going on here. He tried really hard. He put up a very strong effort in Iowa, given his faith-based approach to the campaign. Not surprised that he would focus there. He got about to 5 to 7% in some polls, but he was definitely lagging behind Trump, DeSantis, and some others. So sorry to see him go, but it's the right decision.
I completely agree, Greg, that one of the lessons that a lot of politicians who want to be president have a hard time learning is that people liking you is not necessarily the same as saying they want you to be the next president of the United States. And even if they kind of like you as a presidential candidate, you have to be there. They only get one choice. They only get one ballot, and sometimes a pollster will ask who's your second choice or something, but you don't get any votes if you're the second choice. They only get one vote. So you have to be their favorite. You have to be their favorite, ideally by a considerable margin. And Tim Scott was not many people's favorite by a considerable margin. And it's a tough lesson, but one that he learned faster. I think it's I think Tim Scott leaving this race makes everybody other than, not named Trump, DeSantis, or Haley, really, there's no point in you remaining in the race. Sorry, Chris Christie. Sorry, Vivek Ramaswamy. Doug Burgum, what are you doing here? And this just handed to me. Asa Hutchinson is still in this race, which like it's a joke, but what are you doing? It's like the end of it's like Ferris Bueller at the end of the movie. What are you still doing here? Go home. My thought about the Tim Scott campaign was it was a useful experiment. Tim Scott was running what struck me as probably along with DeSantis, very clearly a post-Trump candidacy, not an anti-Trump candidacy. I think that describes Chris Christie pretty well. Just basically wanting to put the Trump era behind us and focus on issues and focus on policies and to be sunny and optimistic, very much a stylistic change from the Trump years, but not actually rebuking him. Every now and then you could find Tim Scott, criticizing Trump on past comments about race. And he recently said that he was, selling out the pro-life cause. But by and large, Tim Scott was not here to argue about Donald Trump. And I find that very appealing. Unfortunately, the majority of Republicans don't find that very appealing. We could say that, this is what the Republican primary voter electorate ought to want, but it is not what they want. And the other thing I'd point out is a couple of weeks ago, the Tim Scott Super PAC canceled a whole bunch of ad purchase. They'd reserved airtime for commercials, and then they canceled it. And I and a bunch of other folks looked at this and said, writing's on the wall. And ironically, this was happening right as Tim Scott was making a big deal out of him formally registering in places like the South Carolina primary. And there was some pushback saying, this is just strategic repositioning. No. History shows us when campaigns start canceling ad buys, it's usually a sign that the end is near. And this is yet another case. Don't get mad at us for knowing history and understanding when A leads to B. We're not being negative. We're not being mean. We're just calling them as we see them. So, Tim Scott, you're going to go back to South Carolina, and my guess is you'll be reelected to the Senate as many times as you like. He comes out with his reputation pretty intact. Just this was not the cycle for him.
No. I mean, there are even two significant candidates from his state, which makes it tough to punch through. But the surprising thing last night, according to some tweets I saw, was that his own staff was caught a little off guard by this. Trey Gowdy, if you watch the video, was clearly caught off guard by this. And so it must have been a pretty tight inner circle making this call at that particular time.
Raising the question, should they have been? I mean, like, he put all of his resources into Iowa. I checked this morning. He's at like 6.7% in Iowa. Should anyone be that shocked that he would say, that's it? Okay. We all got to see his girlfriend. Good for you, Tim Scott.
That 6.7% might factor in come caucus day, depending if he endorses and the people that support him follow his lead on that. But, the thing with staffers is, of course, is that as long as you stay in, they have jobs. So yeah. they definitely want to encourage the boss to keep going.
That's why they're always saying, things are looking up,
Yes. So tough time for the campaign. And we wish those folks well that worked for Tim Scott. And we certainly wish the senator well as well. All right. Well, let's talk about a fantastic sponsor for today. And that is Moink. Look, we're getting close to the holiday season. Chances are there are people in your family saying, hey, what can I get you? And you're thinking, what do I actually need? What do I really want? What about a great box of phenomenal meat? That would be fantastic. Moink can accomplish that for you. And it has the best bacon I've ever had. It has phenomenal steaks and burgers and chicken and so many other products that you or the person you love will very much appreciate.
The Moink difference is something you can taste, and you can feel good knowing you're helping family farms stay financially independent too. And you get to choose whatever meal you want delivered in every box, whether it's ribeyes or chicken breasts or pork chops or salmon fillets and much more. And remember, you can cancel anytime.
It's fantastic. I love every Moink box that I've ever had. And like Jim said, you get to decide what's in it. So you will love it too. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/martini right now. And listeners of the 3 Martini Lunch will get free ground beef for a year. That's 1 year of the best ground beef you'll ever taste, but it's only available for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/martini. That's moinkbox.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And this has been a martini so many different times with Joe Biden in terms of kind of getting lost of where he's supposed to walk or losing his train of thought or cutting off his story because he forgot where the story was going. But Jonathan Martin over at Politico today is the latest in a long list of stories ever since that New York Times poll came out of quiet panic over Joe Biden's prospects, given that he's behind in some of those critical battleground states. Although, as Andy McCarthy pointed out last week, those polls did not include Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as a candidate. And so that could shake things up a little bit. But Jonathan Martin admitting the big problem here among Biden's lack of accomplishment on virtually every issue and making things worse in a lot of ways. But here's what he says about Biden's mental capacity. The oldest president in history, when he first took the oath, Biden will not be able to govern and campaign in the manner of previous incumbents. He simply does not have the capacity to do it. And his staff doesn't trust him to even try, as they make clear by blocking him from the press. Biden's bid will give new meaning to a Rose Garden campaign, and it requires accommodation to that unavoidable fact of life. So he can't do his job. So instead of suggesting, hey, like David Axelrod did, you might want to step aside and let somebody else be the candidate. No. We got to set up this elaborate campaign that we got to bring Rahm Emanuel out of mothballs. We got to bring back some of the Obama campaign strategies, ramp up the use of the Congressional Black Caucus to beef up Black voter support, which seems to be ebbing a little bit. And so it's the obvious answer is staring them right in the face. But instead, they're like, all right, well, how do we make chicken salad out of this?
The things we could do on an R-rated podcast. So yeah, Greg, the preceding sentence in that passage you quote says, 2024 will be an extraordinary election and it demands extraordinary measures. My colleague Charlie Cook points out, I got to stop Martin right there. It's not extraordinary. It is disqualifying. Probably longtime listeners have picked up on this. One of my theories, I can't prove it, but I feel like there's circumstantial evidence accumulating. One of my theories is like when we can't see Joe Biden, he's worse than when we can see him. That there's a reason he doesn't do events early in the morning. There's a reason he doesn't do events at night. Almost all of us have dealt with a grandparent or an aging parent, and just kind of recognizing that they have good days and bad days. They often have better times of day than others, and that my suspicion is that at some point when Biden leaves office, we will get, maybe Jonathan Martin will write this book, maybe Franklin Foer, maybe Bob Costa, maybe Bob Woodward. Somebody's going to write a book, and the theme of the book is going to be, behind the scenes, it was clear that Biden's, age and was becoming a bigger problem, and his health was starting to fail. But, some number of, Ron Klain, Jill Biden, and Susan Rice decided this had to be kept under, there'd be some sort of theme of like, whoa, Biden was in much worse shape behind the scenes than anyone knew. And my suspicion is, because I've heard various stories. I've heard from a Republican senator up on Capitol Hill who says that meetings with Biden get canceled with very little warning. Now, this could happen for any one of a whole bunch of reasons. The president has all kinds of stuff. You never know when there's a foreign crisis or some other thing he's got to deal with. Okay, it's conceivable. But Biden took office as the oldest president by like 8 years. But it's not just like, oh, Biden's an old president. Biden is the oldest president we've ever had by a considerable margin. And each day he only gets older. And each year, he's turning 81 this month. He's 80, at 81, he's going to be in worse shape than he was 80. And when he was 80, he's going to be in worse shape than he was at 79, and so on. And we can see it. We can see it in his, increasingly rare and scripted public appearances. So my suspicion is that the White House is trying to hide something that we can already see, and something that we can already sense, and something that we already know because we've been around elderly people. And Joe Biden he's not just old, he's elderly. Most people his age are either in a retirement home or, living quietly. They are not running the country in what most people think is one of the toughest jobs in the world. And you can already see, I've talked about Biden being a part-time president. When you look at his public schedule, I think he's simply not capable of doing the job certain times a day. And the presidency is a 24-hour job. You never know when you're going to get that 3 a.m. phone call, as they said in that Obama and Hillary, campaign ads. Everybody's trying to hide something that we can all kind of sense and we can all kind of see. And it'll be that my suspicion is it'll be a huge factor in 2024. And it may well be enough to get Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is elected. And this has all kind of been in denial. This has all kind of been in this adamant insistence that what we can, see with our eyes is not really true. And that everybody kind of knew back in 2019 that it was kind of ridiculous for Joe Biden to remain president into his 80s. But the idea is he was going to be this bridge president. He was going to pass the torch to Kamala Harris or somebody else. Well, Democrats they're afraid of that, understandably. She'd probably lose re-elect if she were the nominee, and she probably would not be a particularly good president. But that's where we are. So kind of bizarre to see, he's not capable of doing the job. So the question for the campaign is, how can they hide it? Guess what, Democrats? You can't hide it.
No, it's pretty obvious day after day, but they are circling the wagons. They'll distract you from it as much as possible. They'll focus obviously on all the Trump trials, especially if he's the nominee. If it's DeSantis, they'll send a barrage after him. And while the media loves Nikki Haley right now, if she emerges somehow as the nominee, they'll go after her, just like they love John McCain. And then they went after him in 2008. It doesn't matter who the Republican nominee is. They'll be the worst person in the world to the mainstream media for however many months it takes until Election Day. So the media, if this was obviously a Republican president, the story wouldn't be, how can they, convince the American people to vote for this person who can't do the job anyway? It's, this person obviously has to go. It's obvious that they need a different candidate.
Yeah. The subtext of this is, it's an intriguing strategic conundrum of how do you campaign and persuade the American public that he's capable of doing the job when he obviously is not. But let's talk about that strategy.
Yes, exactly.
Let's just gloss over the fact he can't do the job. You just said it. Wait, underline that part of the sentence in red. So.
Well, the good news for Biden is that while he's obviously too old to be president, he's almost old enough to be in the Senate. So he was actually very young when he was elected to the Senate. But for a lot of these folks, they're just hitting their prime in their 80s. All right, time for our next sponsor for the day, and that is 4Patriots, makers of the new and improved Patriot Power Generator 2000X. This is a solar generator which charges more devices for longer in a blackout. And look, you don't know how long your power is going to stay out when that happens. And so it's best to be prepared with the best possible generator. Make sure that fridge is up and running. Make sure that wonderful moink meat that you just bought stays fresh and ready for you whenever you want to eat it. Also, your freezer, your medical devices, and a whole lot more. It's now got double the capacity, more peak power than before, plus new expandable capability for even more power. Comes with a solar panel. Never need to buy gas for this thing. It's fume-free, silent, and safe. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. So visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim. Speaking of President Biden, he will be at the APEC Summit, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco this week. It's a summit that, is in all different countries. They rotate year by year. San Francisco, of course, has been in our martinis before, and not because it's such a sterling example of a host city for a major international event, but because it's falling apart. You've got rampant crime, you've got a homeless situation that's completely out of control, and you've even got a situation where people have to watch their step, not because of dog waste, human waste. But apparently, Jim, that can be fixed, at least on a temporary basis, when a major event is coming to town. Forget the people that live there on a daily basis. When you've got Xi Jinping and the Prime Minister of Japan and the Aussies and Biden himself and Justin Trudeau probably. All of a sudden, as Fox 2 San Francisco reports here, they not only can get it done, they just have extra money lying around that can pay for it. It was totally doable the whole time.
While San Francisco is in the spotlight for the Asia Pacific Economic Conference, city leaders are making sure the city shines. Caltrans repaving major roadways like the Harrison Street off-ramp from the I-80. BART doubling down by deep cleaning their stations overnight more often. Scrubbing and power washing is happening all over the city. It's noticeable how clear the streets look and how few homeless encampments there are on major thoroughfares. Public Works is installing decorative crosswalks in North Beach and Chinatown, and the Webster Street pedestrian bridge in Japantown was recently repainted. The Yerba Buena Gardens at the Moscone Center are decked out with new colorful landscaping and murals, paid for by the Clean California Grant, just in time for the 20,000 high-profile CEOs and heads of state coming into town next week. And city officials are saying that there are no additional funds that are being allocated for beautification. Departments are just using existing budgets.
Existing budgets that they didn't tap to clean up this mess before. Now, of course, the homeless people didn't go away, Jim. They just shoved them into a different neighborhood and they'll be back. But when you consider how city officials treat their own tax-paying residents compared to dignitaries who will be in town for less than a week, the voters of San Francisco ought to be steaming mad right now.
So this was the lead topic in a buffet table of a morning jolt that I wrote up today. I concur with everything you said, Greg. I'm just going to add two, I think, very revealing details. The first is that one of the places that they are cleaning is the Speaker Nancy Pelosi Federal Building at the corner of 7th and Mission Streets, which is less than a mile from the conference center. Now, yes, this means that, San Francisco has a Speaker Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. It opened, I think, I want to say 2016, 2017, something like that. I don't like naming federal buildings or really anything over someone who's still alive. I realize in the state of West Virginia, that's blasphemy. Everything in the state of West Virginia is blamed after Robert Byrd. But here's the great irony of this. So first of all, for a long stretch, the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building was largely empty. You could say that's an appropriate tribute to the person it's named after. But also, this past August, not very long ago, officials at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services advised hundreds of employees to work remotely. It wasn't because of COVID, but work remotely for the foreseeable future due to public safety concerns outside of the building. That is, there were enormous numbers of homeless people, enormous numbers of drug trade going on, and high numbers of crime, stabbings, and things like that. It was too dangerous for federal workers to come into that building. So naturally, they had to do something. As I understand, I don't even know if they've gone back to the office, Greg. But what they did to deal with the crime, homelessness, and all the other antisocial and dangerous behavior going on outside the building. You know what they did, right, Greg?
What?
They put up a fence, a wall. Now, Now, Nancy Pelosi told us the border walls are immoral. But yes, there is now a high chain link fence surrounding the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building in San Francisco because it's otherwise too dangerous and all that stuff. You could, choke on the irony of all that. You could see it as a heavy-handed metaphor, all that stuff. But on the broader issue of cleaning up San Francisco, first of all, like San Francisco residents, like we may kind of chuckle at them being limousine liberals and like, yes, they deserve some of the mockery, but let's also point out they pay some of the highest property taxes and sales taxes in the country. That's one of the reasons cost of living is so high. So think of the message being sent by the city that we will clean up the streets for Xi Jinping when he comes to visit. But you, the people who pay our salaries, we don't have to do that. We're just not that motivated. You're just not that important enough to us. The dictator of China, he is. The other thing I should point out, you are correct, by the way. There's no special shelter capacity being opened up for the conference. They're just literally moving them out. Now, they say this came out of existing funds. I would point out the city of San Francisco raised $20 million to cover the costs of hosting the summit. I don't know if it was going to policing and other stuff or what other expenses. Came from the Pritzkers. You recognize that family name?
Sure.
Illinois residents. Google, Apple, a bunch of the tech ones. And the single biggest donation came from Grattan Casino and Resort, operated by the Federated Indians of Grattan Rancheria. So the Indian casinos are paying the biggest chunk of the $20 million that the city needed for its expenses for hosting the convention.
Yeah, so good luck, San Francisco. You can see how much your leadership actually cares about you. It's just about the TV shots and the impression that the foreign dignitaries have while they're in town. So don't worry. The squalor will return within a couple of weeks, I'm sure. But I'm guessing if a Republican mayor had moved homeless people to a different part of town, there'd be a few more stories on the treatment of that, too. But if we didn't have double standards, we'd have no standards at all. So, Jim, have a good day, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Monday, and join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.